In an effort to help you write better essays, I'd like to review some of the main conventions for writing about literature. Most of this should have been covered in English 102, so I'll really be doing this just in review mode rather quickly. If you need to follow up on any of these in more detail, they're easily found in any good college handbook or online, or I'd be happy to direct you if you ask me. So first of all, you need to be very careful with the assignment's minimum requirements, and I write the assignment topics very carefully. I will always give you a minimum word count, and then sometimes I will give you a recommended word count, which will be different. For example, I might say that the essay must be at least 750 words, but closer to 1,000 words is recommended. That would mean that if it's shorter than 750 words, it's not even eligible to pass. But I'm looking for something closer to 1,000 words, really. Okay, and I know that most of you are going beyond just, the good enough level. You also might see minimum requirements with regard to outside research. I may say that you need 2 scholarly sources for this essay, and it will be different from assignment to assignment. Keep in mind that when I say scholarly sources, that rules out things like Wikipedia. It rules out study guide type resources like Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, and so forth. Okay, when we say scholarly sources, we usually mean something written by a scholar, an academic, right, for an academic audience, usually in something like an academic journal. So it may be an article from a journal, or possibly an entire book written for an academic audience. Okay, so the place to go would not be Google. The place to go would be the databases using Lawson State's library. We cover that in some other places, but be careful with that particular requirement of outside research. When writing about literature, avoid unnecessary summary. You should assume that your reader knows the basic plot. They have read the story or the novel. They have read the poem. They know the basic characters and what happens. Don't waste time in your essay with unnecessary repetition of the plot. The best analogy that I can give you is this. You've just gone out to see a movie with some friends. You all sit there together and watch the movie. Then you go out for coffee and you're going to talk about the movie. You wouldn't start retelling the story from scratch as if they weren't even there. They know what happened, right? You could refer to moments in the story along the way, right, as you want to say something about it, make an observation, for example, but don't tell the story as if your reader's unfamiliar with it. Avoid slipping into book report mode. A common way that people will do this is in their introduction, they go into long biographies of the writer, and often that doesn't have anything to do with their thesis or their argument in that essay or what the essay is trying to accomplish, right? So it's really just kind of a wasted paragraph. I'm not telling you that you can't include biographical details. Of course you can, if it has something to do with the argument of your essay. For example, if you want to claim that Emily Dickinson uses so many dashes in her poetry because she is trying to convey that the speaker is feeling uncertain and hesitant, and that's why the lines stop and start so much with all these dashes. And you could tie that back to maybe a lack of confidence in Emily Dickinson herself, tied to some, biographical experience, right, or elements of her own personality. Sure, include biographical detail then, but don't just automatically give long biographical paragraphs as if you were kind of writing a book report on the author. Your essay should make an argument. That means that your thesis is not self-evident, but it's actually a point of view that somebody could actually disagree with, right? This would not make a good thesis statement. Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, has been commanded by his father's ghost to kill his uncle Claudius. Your reader already knows that. She's read the play. That's just the basic premise, right, of the play that gets the action started. Okay, your thesis really should be some kind of interpretive statement that not everyone's going to agree with, and you're going to present some evidence that will support that interpretive point of view, right? Where will you go for evidence? Your main place will be the text itself. You will be constantly going back and quoting from the text itself. About 20% of your overall word count should just be quoting from the play or the short story, the poem that you're dealing with in your essay. Okay, about 20% of the time, right? It's about a fifth. The second place you might go for evidence to support your thesis would be outside scholarly sources. Literary critics, for example, right? Scholars of some kind, right? Who are talking about the literary text that you're working on. You don't want to just simply report what they say and that's the end of it. You're really turning to them occasionally to help you make your own argument, right? So it just lends a little extra credibility, a little extra weight to an argument that you're already making if some other scholar out there, right, has made a similar kind of point, okay? So that'd be a second place to go for evidence, okay? So you're not summarizing. The point of the purpose of your essay is not just to prove that you read. Of course you read, right? This is a college essay, right? It's really to advance the thinking and the conversation about the literary text that you're working on. So you'll be quoting frequently. Most of your quotations will be short quotations, okay? When you quote more than 4 lines as you type them, then you need to switch to block quotations, right? So let me skip ahead to show you some of these things. So here are some basic quotations, and you'll notice that the entire sentence is not all quotation. You have to have a tag attached to it, like in her diary, young Anne Frank writes, or God asks Adam and Eve, right? Or even demands Lady Macbeth. So there's some part of the sentence that's not part of the quotation, but you're identifying the speaker of the quotation. We usually call that the tag. The tag can be at the beginning of the sentence, like it is in the first two. It may be at the end, like it is in the third one. Okay. Do you notice that the tag and the quote are usually separated by a comma, like after the word writes or after the name Eve? Okay. Of course, the quotation is in quotation marks itself. Those numbers at the end, right, those are citations, right? So that's telling you that this quote from Anne Frank is from page 201 of her diary, which you will give full bibliographic information for on your works cited page. So that page 201 or that number 201 there is meaningful. Block quotations, when you want to do a longer quotation, which should be rare, maybe 1, 2 at the most in a short essay, okay? But if you want to quote longer, right, do it like this. Do you notice that that quotation is twice as far as a normal indent would be? You drop the quotation marks. The tag for it remains in the paragraph above. Nellie Dean treats Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him throughout her narration. Then a colon, then you drop down, indent twice as far as a normal paragraph, and include your block. The block is not centered on the page or the screen. It just is indented, right? You go all the way over to your right-hand margin like you already do, okay? You can find more examples of block quotations properly formatted just by Googling MLA block quotation, and you'll find a lot of examples. Okay, so back to our checklist, right? When you quote from poetry, you need to keep all the capitalization and the punctuation exactly as it was in the original. When you quote short quotations, which would be by far the most common thing you do, the blocks are rare, you need to use slashes to show where the lines broke. In Sonnet 130, Shakespeare admits, there's your tag, here comes the quote, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red." So you see the slash there, right, is just showing you where the line stopped, the first line stopped, and the second line began. Coral is capitalized because in the original poem, coral is capitalized because it's the beginning of the second line. Okay, so be careful with that when you're quoting from poetry. Okay. Titles in your essay need to be formatted a certain way. This is a little bit tedious, but it's something that you should know. Okay, and it's distracting for your reader when you don't follow these conventions. So let me show you some examples here. All right, those first three are long works. The first two are full-length novels, and the third is a full play. So they are italicized. The second set of two, The Telltale Heart and A Good Man Is Hard to Find, those are short stories, right? So they're in quotation marks instead, because short works go in quotation marks, long works are italicized. The third set, those are poems. The Raven, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, those are poems. Okay, so they're in quotation marks too, if they're short poems. If it were a book-length poem like the Iliad or the Odyssey, right, which is more rare, you would italicize. But your normal short lyric poem you read all in one sitting, right, those are in quotation marks. You also have certain capitalization rules you need to be careful with. You automatically capitalize the first word and the last word, no matter what. The words in the middle capitalize everything, but there are three exceptions. Don't capitalize prepositions, words like in, of, at, from, through, for, right? Don't capitalize conjunctions, and, but, or. And don't capitalize articles, words like a, an, and the. Okay, it's not about short versus long. Notice that is a verb. That's not one of those three exceptions, so is capitalized. Okay, so why do we see this one not following those conventions? The exception to the rule is when the poet did not give the poem a title. Then the convention is to use the first line as the title, but you type it out like this to show that this is really not Emily Dickinson's title that she created. It's just the convention, right? And so we're going to title it just like it appeared in the first line of her poem. Death was capitalized in her original poem, so I'm going to keep death capitalized there, but the rest of these words were lowercase, so I just leave them exactly as they appeared in the original. Citations, right? These are those numbers that come at the end whenever you have paraphrased or quoted, right? We cite prose by page numbers and poetry by line numbers. You can see that this first one must be a poem because there's a slash there, right? So this is line 11 and 12. I don't use the word line or anything like that. I don't use P or PP for page in these others. I just put the number. Okay, and all of these would appear on the works cited page so that those numbers are meaningful. They link back up to some original source. And then on your works cited page, you need to be very careful that your entries are following MLA format, right? And there's a certain way that each entry needs to be put. There's certain information that you need and the way that it needs to be formatted. Don't make up your own format. This is something that you really should have learned very carefully in English 101 and then reinforced in 102. But if you need to go back and catch up, I have a separate video for you on MLA citation and documentation, but it's important that you get these details right. Okay, there's a handout with more detail for you, right, that I've created, writing about literature, so that will be posted for you on Blackboard. Okay, I'm happy to answer any questions about these, and I know this was a very quick review, okay, but please take care to follow these conventions in your essays.